to meeting number 12 of the Standing Committee on Industry. And I want to thank the witnesses for being so patient today. I'm sorry that we were late, but there was a vote in the House pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee. The committee is meeting to study sourcing and processing of critical minerals. The meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021, so people can attend in person or remotely using Zoom. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants of this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted, and the proceedings will be available via the website. We have the first panel that will end at 4:45. Because we have until 5:45, we will try to make sure we have time for all of our witnesses. We have from the Government of Ontario, the Honourable Greg Rickford, the Ministry of Northern Development, Mines and Natural Resources and Forestry. For our second hour, we have Benoit Plante, professor at the University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, Peter Xavier, Vice President in Sudbury for Glencore Canada, José Méthode from the Quebec Mining Association, Robert Kunihiro from Stromvolt Americas Inc., Amanda Hall, geophysicist from Summit Nanotech Corporation. We have also Juan Merlini and AJ Nichols from Valley Canada. I will now call on Mr. Rickford. Minister, thank you for being with us. You have 6 minutes, and then we will go to questions.
Okay. Make sure. Check. Can everybody hear me? Take that as a yes. Listen, I want to thank folks for giving me the opportunity to speak to this important standing committee. Industry and technology folks would know that Canada is well positioned, and for the purposes of today's discussion, the province of Ontario well positioned to seize, especially in the context of ensuing global strife, a position unlike any other in the history of certainly our province, the country of Canada, and the world over. In the critical mineral space. Why? Well, there's probably a couple of reasons. First of all, countries like Russia and China have a stranglehold on the access and processing capacity of many of the critical minerals that are used today in various technologies, especially the ones that are most exciting to all of us for environmental purposes: electric vehicle, electric battery capacity, and of course its storage potential as well. All of these things can, are, and will happen in the province of Ontario and for the benefit of this country. And so the residual question for us all, colleagues, is in the name of bringing critical minerals home to Canada, and for my purposes, Ontario is about being involved in the single biggest environmental policy ever advanced by a jurisdiction the world over, bringing world-class standards in labor, environment, and in working with our Indigenous communities. Always a work in progress as part of our value proposition. And we think there's a role for the federal government. That's why I'm thrilled to be here today. This probably starts out for me in the context of my provincial career at PDAC a couple of years ago, when Joseph Semsar, the former U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade, approached Ontario and myself directly to discuss the need to build out a secure, stable supply of critical minerals and to meet the growing demand across Northern Ontario. move the clock ahead a couple of years to just the past week or two, we've seen some interesting things. President Biden laid claim to a domestic supply chain and the need thereof of critical minerals. Pretty interesting for a president that doesn't have any. And so his his reference to a domestic supply chain necessarily includes Canada, at least for the extraction, likely for the processing. And if we have our way, a significant part of the integrated supply chain, especially in battery vehicle and battery storage technologies. And then just yesterday, of course, Premier Ford and my friend and colleague, Minister Fedeli, got back from Washington. They had a robust agenda to talk about with our US counterparts, and very quickly in every single meeting, it was dominated by discussions around critical minerals. So friends and colleagues, this is very real to us. And I think if I've put a value proposition out there for the province of Ontario, it necessarily includes every single province in Canada. We're all busy with critical mineral strategies. We're likely ahead of the curve in some of our jurisdictions, but there's no question our friends in Quebec and British Columbia especially have created aggressive environments for investment in critical minerals, most notably lithium in the case of Quebec and various others in British Columbia. But the demand has been met with the opportunity. And I think that our rollout last week of Ontario's first ever critical minerals strategy, with a solid financial footing with which to advance it, moves it out of the class of strategies governments, of course, are renowned for producing and lesser known for acting on. This is targeted. It focuses on exploration and innovation in the sector. Nous avons lancé la toute première stratégie ontarienne sur les minéraux essentiels et investi 29 millions de dollars dans des programmes qui feront progresser l'exploration et l'innovation dans le secteur. Our strategy includes an injection into, I think, Ontario's biggest challenge and now opportunity, and that's on the exploration side. Okay, I got an echo here. Check, check, check. Through the Ontario Junior Exploration Program, which includes a new critical mineral stream. We also have a component for a critical mineral investment fund to kickstart innovation for mining and processing capabilities. We don't want to just be miners, friends and colleagues. We want to be involved in the processing. We're well on our way. Cobalt Ontario is going to have the first cobalt processing facility and capacity in North America in the not too distant future. And we see a bright horizon for lithium as well, working with our counterparts around the world to develop the capacity to process. In fact, I forgot to, in all the excitement of this discussion, mention the European Union, who we met with last. Okay, somebody's doing something funky with the mics here. It's interrupting the flow here. Are we good, clerk? Okay. And the European Union wants to set up a strategic alliance with the province of Ontario. They see partnerships in Norway and in Germany around processing capacity, something we can learn from those jurisdictions, but they know where they need to go. Tired, of course, and fearful of long-term relationships with countries like China and Russia. The province of Ontario, and I believe the country of Canada, is at the precipice of greatness in the critical mineral space. And so our strategy includes the extraordinary opportunities that we see in the Ring of Fire, a multi-generational potential to produce some of the highest grade nickel sulfide, chromite, and other critical minerals, including titanium, palladium, and the likes are coming to a theater near you. In fact, some of them are being produced and cooperatively developed and processed in some of our more peaceful partners, as I mentioned, in the European Union. So that's why they want to be partners with us. We believe that responsible mineral development in this region would unlock unprecedented economic prosperity for vast municipalities and Indigenous communities across the far north, at least in Ontario. And certainly from my own experience in the federal chapter of my career, for the benefit of communities in the far north, most notably Indigenous and Inuit communities. As Prime Minister Harper and I had discussed at some point in a previous career, we can no longer stand by and see these incredible mining opportunities developed in close proximity to Indigenous communities and see even with resources going to them from the activity itself, a level of poverty that is well known to all of us. So this is an exciting opportunity, and that's why we committed more than or close to $1 billion to support legacy infrastructure projects, particularly for the Ring of Fire, but frankly, the Greenstone Belt that runs just to the south of it. Some of the most exciting open pit and subsurface mining operations have come on board in the past 3 years, like has never happened before. These include cost-sharing agreements to secure an opportunity of national significance for future generations. Notably, our successes in moving a number of key mining projects across critical milestones have involved full cooperation and partnerships with Indigenous communities and their businesses. They have put in effect substantial and substantive elements of the business, environmental, and labor contours to these successful developments, and we want to keep that going. We've also included investments into electro battery materials. We're exploring the expansion of a business model to include building an industrial battery park in the Cobalt, Ontario, in that region of northeastern Ontario. And as I alluded to earlier, some exciting innovations with companies like Frontier Lithium. So I could talk much longer, colleagues, as many of you know, and nothing from you, Minister Fast. We've sat in cabinet together. But nous savons qu'il existe de nombreux.
We know that there are many other advanced lithium projects, and we are exploring partnerships and must do so for lithium hydroxide processing capabilities in strategic locations such as Thunder Bay.
An integrated supply chain that Ontario thinks and knows, in fact, that we can bring to Canada's storefront offering for some of the most exciting technological developments, not just in the automotive sector, not just in the technology sector, but also for opportunities like national defense, and of course, not only a robust supply chain here in Ontario from extraction to deploying these technologies, but as well in global supply chains. So we need the federal government, colleagues. We need you there up in Ottawa to support us. I know there are other great things going on in other provinces that members on this committee represent, and I'm happy to have those discussions. I'll stand down now and take your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Minister Rickford, and thanks for sharing some of the work that you're doing in Ontario. It's much appreciated by committee members, and we'll start now with our first round of questions from Mr. Généreux.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rickford. Good afternoon, Bernie.
2009-2011. It's a pleasure to meet you here today. Craig, pardon, tu as parlé de...
Mr. Rickford?
One of that, sometimes we're politicians, we go by a lot of names.
Tu as parlé de...
You talked about the importance of a national strategy, of course, including those of Ontario, Quebec, and other provinces. What are your expectations in Ontario from the federal government in terms of a national strategy?
And great to see you. I think two things come to mind. The first one is political, perhaps, and government related. The other one is strategic business concept. In the first instance, I think that the federal government has to ensure that it's aligned with things that are happening on the ground. Sometimes we wind up at cross purposes. So I've written about Bill C-69 and some of my concerns about it, but it didn't take very long and it was plonked down on the ring of fire. Without any consultation to the provincial government. That was unfortunate. To the credit of Minister O'Regan, he kind of saved the day. And we were able, with our partners in the private sector and some of the Indigenous communities, make sure that and hopefully the federal government will announce it shortly, ring fence the impact assessment or whatever they're calling it to the mining activity itself. Leave us alone to move ahead with what we're calling the corridor to prosperity. We don't build mines in Ontario as a government. We provide the right conditions for those to proceed. And certainly the levers that are most accessible to us are things like building legacy infrastructure for health, social, and economic policy objectives that I think those isolated Indigenous communities and more remote municipalities have a serious interest in. Good recovery on the part of the federal government. We were able to, as we understand, and hopefully the federal government will bring more clarity and certainty that in the coming days or week, that's the case. Getting together on legacy infrastructure projects. Wate Power in northwestern Ontario, one of the largest scale hydro projects, has a great relationship with the federal government, a joint investment that will electrify communities that I've lived and worked in back in the day as a nurse, worked in as a lawyer, and represented politically. Bernard and
have other questions,
success. We're there. I know you do, Bernie, but I just got to get this out. On the business
Let me talk a bit.
Side, on the business concept side, to simply make sure that we complement each other as provinces in what we can and can't do.
Okay. Bien vu pas.
Well, then there's the sale of neolithium to Chinese interests within the last few months. And on this side of the House, or the committee in this case, we feel that there should have been a more intensive scrutiny process for that sale, for a deposit that is not in Canada, but it belonged to a Canadian company. So do you think in the future there should be an automatic analysis for a sale when it comes to critical minerals?
We have an obligation to do it, Bernie. Quite frankly, as collective jurisdictions that comprise a confederation called Canada, the world has come to our doorstep. They've asked us to do more than just mine. They want us to process. They want us to present the opportunity for a fully integrated supply chain. Currently, there's a stranglehold by China and Chinese companies, as well as Russia, especially when it comes to nickel and a couple of other critical minerals that they could cut off at any point in time. The United States is scurrying around looking for the future of this, and I think it's right at their doorstep, frankly. It's called Quebec, it's called Ontario, it's called British Columbia, it's called Manitoba, it's called Canada. And from a government and business perspective, I think we have an obligation to offer that to the world.
Greg, avez-vous des...
Greg, do you have any partnerships in particular with Quebec, between Ontario and Quebec in this area?
I think, we have forums, Bernie, that we do through FPTs. But we are looking through PDAC later this spring at crystallizing some good discussion points to formalize a venue where we could do complementary work as governments and as businesses. Obviously, the excitement around lithium in Quebec is justified on the manufacturing, in terms of processing and manufacturing. There may be some limitations there that Ontario can help with. But I think jointly we're well positioned in the center of Canada to do business with a corridor in the United States that that they've come and asked us directly to be involved with.
Thank you, Mr. Rickford.
Merci.
That's all the time we have. We'll now move to Mr. Fillmore for 6 minutes.
Minister Rickford, it's a pleasure to meet you. You've got carriage of the critical minerals file at a historic moment in their role in the way that we address the future, and I wish you with great sincerity the best of luck with your strategy. Ontario right now has I think it's about 130 early exploration projects and about 16 projects that are kind of at a more advanced stage. So there's some catch-up that needs to be done there. And I was wondering if you could share with the committee a little bit about how the strategy is going to sort of bring some balance to that 160 versus 130 versus 16, how you're going to catch those other projects up.
Well, we could catch a lot of those projects up right now if we could have regulatory certainty from the federal government, Andy, on some of our major projects, including, as I mentioned, the Ring of Fire. But this is a positive, nonpartisan conversation that we need to have, and it's happening right now here today. That does prevent us from moving ahead, certainly. But for the purposes of our strategy, Andy, this is a great question and a great opportunity for us. Obviously, on the junior exploration side, it's important to lock down and identify, as we have, for example, in the Ring of Fire, some of the highest grade of nickel supply and quantity and quality in the Ring of Fire. Its closest comparison would likely be Indonesia, who has to extract it from pig iron and burn off a lot of coal in order to do it. So these are projects that must move ahead. We've moved a couple of major gold mine projects across critical milestones, most notably leave to construct, operation or expansion. And of note, have at least in one instance, the Borden mine site, it's completely electrified. So we've had our own regulatory challenges, Andy, I have to admit. A bit of a hangover from the previous decade and a half of the last government. We've been working on red tape reduction in our own shop to make sure that these mines can move forward. We're not going to compromise the environmental standards or any of the opportunities with our Indigenous communities as partners. But the collective effort, and certainly in the context of our discussion today, we all have to be singing from the same songbook.
Okay, thank you for that. You mentioned Indigenous partners, and we're hearing from mining companies, mining organizations about the importance of Indigenous consultation and including Indigenous communities as partners. How does if you could enlighten us on how the strategy is going to help to bring impacted First Nations along to get on board with specific projects, and then also how we can help to make sure that those nations share in the prosperity that may result?
Well, thank you for that question, Andy. The first answer, I go back to my opening comment. I mean, who doesn't want to be part of the single biggest environmental policy any jurisdiction could advance the world over? And I think that's a new and refreshing way to think about this. There is no green economy without mining, Andy. That's very clear. And I think if you take a look at some of the more contentious matters that Indigenous communities have raised, they're underpinned by concerns about the environment. Obviously, environmental concerns in the propinquity of any mining development that may occur in their to their reserve for the purposes of the Indian Act or their traditional lands and the collective interests of various treaties. But I can tell you from experience, I mentioned these major mining projects that we've advanced in the past couple of years. They are characterized by significant partnerships and roles by Indigenous communities and or their Indigenous businesses in the business contours of a given project, in the environmental processes and contours ultimately of the project, and of course, and importantly, labor. I speak more pointedly of human resources and building capacity in those important areas. That's why we've been able to cut the ribbon on the east-west tie here in a couple of weeks, an important piece of infrastructure across Northern Ontario that will fortify electrification to municipalities and Indigenous communities, but also be an additional source of power for some mining operations across the Greenstone Belt.
1 minute.
Try to keep my answers short.
Okay,
Andy.
looks like we've got a minute.
I've only got about 6 minutes.
I know,
so.
we got a minute left, Minister, and I wonder.
My bad.
I tried. That's quite all right. It's very helpful. I try to ask this question of each of the witnesses that I've been able to speak with. What conditions is your strategy putting in place to facilitate battery recycling and getting the minerals back out when they're expended as a battery?
Well, look, I mean, a lot of this has to be driven by the private sector, Andy. I mean, my own approach here, as I mentioned in my prepared remarks, or as I would make my unprepared remarks, because I didn't really read from the speech, but is to support, have a regulatory environment that supports and facilitates that. We want to be careful that we don't make the same mistakes as we have in some other mining operations and put the cart before the horse. We have to start producing these. And I take your point, Andy. There's got to be a plan for life after electric vehicles. I think the legacy with respect to nuclear technologies is fast becoming what do we do around nuclear waste management. So it's an important point. It's one that should be given the kind of deference by provincial and federal governments to plan and prepare for. But it's not all on me, bro. Right? We've all got to be in this together. And I hope that question is as rhetorical as it would be for our jurisdiction to address in the not too distant future.
We're just looking for good ideas on how we can make sure that those batteries are recyclable when they get expended. I think I'm probably out of time here. I'll just say thank you for joining us today, making time for us, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
You too, Andy. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup. Je passe.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Rickford for being here. I want to appreciate your leadership in being here today and showing us your vision here in the committee as a province. I would have liked to see the same thing from Quebec. I think that very good questions have been asked by my two colleagues, so I've crossed out a couple on my own. But I want to talk about processing, especially with respect to cobalt. I come from the Abitibi-Témiscamingue region, and if I had the right wind, I could get there very quickly. But let's talk about processing. Talk to us about having processing nearby to the extraction of the resource and how that can help our regions. Thank you for that question. I will speak in both languages. Mr. Lemire. Well, we learned lessons from the plan in Quebec for development of the northern part of the region, of the province, and we also have the development project in the CEGEP at Abitibi-Témiscamingue that's important.
Have to be part of this strategy, Mr. Lemire, and their lessons that I have pulled from or pages from the success of the Plan Nord du Québec, frankly, which I believe on a lot of levels is one of the reasons Northern Quebec is having so much success on a number of levels in responsible resource development and an appreciable benefit for Indigenous communities on on all aspects of it. And I mentioned, of course, the role that the Center of Technology Industrielle is playing at, I think it's Université du Québec on Abitibi-Témiscamingue, but as their MP, I'm sure you'd know more about it than I do. But integrating these into institutions of higher learning, I think is a critical element as well, no pun intended, so that folks have a comprehensive understanding of just what we're trying to improve, what we're trying to develop here. So it's not just about exploration, Monsieur le Maire. Par contre, it's also raising awareness about the potential for things like building capacity for processing and being fully integrated in a supply chain within the province of Ontario and in cooperation with jurisdictions like Quebec, especially when it comes to transportation and the prolific work you do in bus manufacturing and some of the exciting opportunities that are taking place on the ground around lithium power supply for those modes of transportation. Does that answer your question?
Absolument.
Absolutely, and thank you very much. It's very full answer and very inspiring. In the next hour, we will have Professor Benoit Plante, who's from the University in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, and he will talk about how that kind of institution can help manufacturing and mineral exploration. Now, there's an aspect that we do have to take into consideration, the fly-in, fly-out habit that we have and the need to develop local labor sources. How do we make sure that we have enough human resources and develop local labor? What do you think that the federal government should do?
Folks at Wailu who obviously successfully, or as it will be announced, it's a matter of public information, a considerable stake in the Ring of Fire, Mr. Le Maire, and it's the billion-dollar question, not the million-dollar question. I spent most of my professional careers living and working in isolated fly-in, fly-out communities, and that connotation comes with some good and some bad. On the energy side, it likely means that the energy sources come from diesel. We have to stop that, Mr. Le Maire, and I'm sure you share that view. So that gets me on my shoebox, if you will, talking about the legacy infrastructure, what governments can really do to contribute to some of these projects. And that is ensure that communities most proximal to these potentially world-class resource projects have the right legacy infrastructure to support them in a comprehensive way. The corridor to prosperity that would run up the middle of Northern Ontario, that's as vast and remote and isolated as any part of Canada, has a compelling need for a corridor here there that could supply energy, could supply a road for better access to health services and programs, economic benefits that move beyond responsible resource development and mining projects in their proximity, and of course, broadband capacity. Without these things, these projects just become the kind of legacy that Canada needs to move out of the business of doing. Some of it will continue to be necessary, particularly in the high Arctic. But even then, governments like our own back in the day had invested in certain critical infrastructure, particularly around highways when and where possible, to ensure that we had alternative corridors for transportation, energy sources, now broadband, and the likes, to ensure that there's a comprehensive sensibility about what we're trying to accomplish here beyond the resource projects themselves. Does that make sense?
Merci sincèrement.
Thank you very much. Sincerely, yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lemire. We will now go to Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes.
Mr. Rickford, for being here. I had the opportunity in the fall to travel to Washington with the International Trade Minister, Mr. Hoback from the Conservative Party, and Mr. Lemire here from the Bloc Québécois. We were there to talk to American legislators about an electric vehicle rebate. its potential impact on Canada. But as part of that conversation, we were also talking about Canada's role to play in providing critical minerals for the EV market. And one of the things that really stood out to me in the course of that lobbying effort was how detrimental it is to Canada's interest not to have a real strategy. Because what it means is that, when we talk to our American counterparts, there's no document that you can use to kind of show them the place not only that Canada can play in their own strategy, but how Canada sees them fitting into our strategy to whether it's for developing resources or manufacturing the cars of the future. And I think that ties in nicely to the questions that were rightly raised earlier around the role of China and Russia in this market. And again, if you treat every acquisition or every new development as a one-off without taking a properly strategic approach, then it's a lot harder to get to where you want to go and to protect Canada's national and security interests. So I just wonder if you have some reflections that you'd care to share with the committee on whatever efforts are taking place to build a proper national strategy around critical minerals and the EV market that we might take to our allies in order to impress upon them the importance of continuing to work with Canada and ensuring that Canada is part of their plans as we go forward into a very different auto market into the future.
Daniel, this is a really important question that you ask, and a friendly hello as a self Mantarian, you could appreciate as my neighbor out there in Kenora. It's great to have a question from you. Look, Manitoba supplies 100% of Canada's cesium, lithium, and tantalum. They're home to some great nickel, copper, zinc, and gold mines in their own right. And I've had a chance to live in many parts of remote northern Manitoba in previous careers. And I've talked at great length about Ontario. I've mentioned British Columbia and Quebec here. I'm trying to be a happy family member and resist the urge to be Marsha Brady as making a special case for Ontario's critical mineral strategy. Some would say, why is Ontario doing this and not the federal government? That may be a cryptic part of your question or an explicit one. Why isn't there a national strategy? In Ontario's case, I think we see an opportunity that's a little bit different from our provincial counterparts, to the extent that with a world-class automotive sector in the manufacturing space, we see this from ground to the car itself, which puts us in a unique position. But certainly, as I mentioned earlier, on legacy infrastructure and a strategy overall, it behooves the federal government to get this right and sit down with the federal government. Some of these FPTs can be pretty boring and agenda driven. It might be useful for us to think about a critical mineral roundtable that endeavors to develop a national coherent strategy for the benefit, especially of our neighbors. We can't have President Biden saying he has needs to focus on a domestic supply of critical minerals. Daniel, he ain't got none, right? I mean, I think there's a little bit of nickel up in Washington State, but other than that, there's not much going on there. So his reference obviously was clearly to Canada. And I think this is an opportunity for the federal government to get together with its provincial counterparts and develop a strategy that acknowledges not only what we're all doing in this space, what we're all talking about on the side with my provincial ministers, but offers up to our friends in the United States and frankly to the rest of the world an alternative to Russia and communist China.
Begin the work of doing some real strategic planning. Of course, I think having a federal strategy, doesn't look like coming in and telling provinces what to do in their own right, because, I agree with you that different provinces have different opportunities. But I think the federal government, in its best light, would convene provinces to try and create a table where, to the maximum possible amount, provincial strategies can be complementary instead of competitive, and can serve a wider Canadian interest. while respecting the individual opportunities of provinces in this. And I think another component that's best done with the federal government at the table, of course, is recognizing the role of Indigenous people and trying to incorporate Indigenous peoples into that planning exercise as early as possible, including that strategic planning. And I wonder, I know you've spoken a little bit already about some of Ontario's work with Indigenous people, but I wonder if you could explain to the committee what steps you're taking to try and incorporate Indigenous communities as early as possible into the planning stages, both of particular projects, but also the larger question of the strategy.
And Minister, I would have to ask you to do it in 15 seconds, and I think you won't be able to. So maybe, Mr. Blakey, maybe we can come back in the second round. You'll have some time for this. Sure.
Maybe somebody from the Conservative Party could give Daniel a couple of extra minutes. That was a great question.
It was indeed a great question, but we have a second round. I'll shorten the time, and I'm sure someone will ask that questions and then let you move on. So we have 10 more minutes with the Minister, and I'll reduce everyone's time to 3 minutes for the Conservative and Liberals, 2 minutes for Bloc and NDP, if we want to have time for our second panel. So we'll start with Mr. Cram for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and Minister Rickford. Welcome to the Industry Committee, and thank you for joining us to share best practices. I understand that the Ontario provincial government has come up with its provincial critical mineral strategy, and I think some people might be reading my notes. One of my questions was about Indigenous consultation and participation, so why don't we pick up there, Minister Rickford? What recommendations would you make in terms of making sure the Indigenous communities are included as participants in a critical mineral strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We're not perfect at it. We're barely good. It's still on a project-to-project basis. I full credit where credit's due. Le Plan Nord du Québec established a template. The James Bay Agreement, obviously a world-class document that generationally has proved to be the platform from which a lot of this good work has been done in the resource development, forestry, and mining. So credit where credit's due, and obviously hydroelectricity generation. I should obviously mention that that underpins it, but you know, as I said earlier, Michael, the success of our projects have always been over the past couple of years characterized by a substantive role, partnership, both in the context of the private partner and the relationship with the government when the Indigenous communities have led. I mean, in the Ring of Fire, the environmental assessment for the Corridor to Prosperity, the road, roughly the length of the distance between Toronto Maple Leafs, Scotiabank Arena, and where the Montreal Canadiens play, is being led by Indigenous communities. Similarly, all of the projects that have moved past the environmental assessment, a leave to construct, have opened or are now expanding, are a testament to the contributions by Indigenous communities and/or their businesses and in Indigenous organizations who have helped put the contours to the business, labor, and environmental elements of the project. So we've got our own templates, plural, to draw from, and I think that's a good indication of what we need to continue to do and how we need to do it.
And in a response to an earlier question, you brought up a Bill C-69 and as it relates to the Ring of Fire. I was just wondering if you were back in federal politics, Minister Rickford, and you could make some changes to Bill C-69, could you offer any recommendations that might be helpful?
Well, I've written extensively about it, Michael, and I want to keep this discussion going without some of the partisanship that sometimes infects conversations like today, because they're important. A heads up would have been good. So just a couple of quick points there, obviously, and I still am concerned about what I call some of the windows for cabinet level government and or other stakeholders and potential partners to press the pause button on a given project at a given state. I think critics on balance, still have some of those concerns. I would have preferred that we test drove Bill C-69 on a project that crossed provincial boundaries instead of being on this project. But hey, it's there, and we've successfully negotiated as different levels of governments and private partners, and I think we're in a decent place, and we'll learn the lessons moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Rickford. We'll now move to Mr. Erskine Smith for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Joel. I appreciated, Mr. Rickford, the comments you made around addressing the regulatory framework, but also ensuring that we don't sacrifice environmental protections and Indigenous consultation with Indigenous communities. When I go through it's a big week for you in some ways. You've got the strategy from the province, and you've also, I understand there's a big announcement coming tomorrow on the EV file. And so when we look to the strategy that you've now got in hand on the critical minerals file, it speaks to a new improving Ontario's regulatory framework, and as part of that, coordinating the new framework with other federal and provincial regulatory requirements. And what I wonder is, short time, you don't have to answer in full. If you could give us some examples, it might be helpful. But what would be really helpful for our purposes as we look to the federal, the way we can complement our own work with yours. You and your officials, if you can follow up at some point with a more detailed set of examples and items where, as we develop our own strategy, we make sure that we complement our strategies in a more perfect way. So say anything you like in response, but it's the follow-up I'm most interested.
Yeah, I mean, in general terms, Nathaniel, it's really just, as I said earlier, and this is metaphor, but, singing from the same songbook, understanding and respecting what each jurisdiction holds near and dear to them, what the value proposition is. So I mentioned Ontario's strategy is bold because we have a rare opportunity from extraction right through to the technology being deployed in manufactured, I should say, here in Southern Ontario, is an extraordinary, one of a kind opportunity. There are differences as we move across the country, but certainly to the extent that major environmental assessments may come into play, especially as they may pertain to a national interest, that we sit down as partners and ensure that we're thinking about it the right way. And that we understand our role is not to build mines, but to create the right conditions for communities, including and most notably Indigenous communities, to benefit from them, to be satisfied from a business, environmental, and human resource perspective that we're pulling the right levers at the right time and providing at the same time the kind of business certainty that these large-scale investments require. And then I would just finish very quickly, Nathaniel, with the infrastructure piece. I can't stress enough that these legacy infrastructure projects are actually bigger than the mining projects over the course of time. Building the corridor to prosperity is going to provide arguably a lot more contemporary jobs when you think about it, and processes than a mining operation sustained over the course of time. So having being involved as full partners on those kinds of things, and we're hearing great things from the federal government on this, would make sense to me. I hope that answers your question.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Rickford. Je passerai maintenant.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Mr. Lemire for 2 minutes. Mr. Rickford, thank you again for your testimony. For me, the issue concerning strategic and critical elements is really to do with electrification of transportation. Last week, we heard from Mr. Zelensky, and I decided to go through Ontario to get home, which I've done before. I knew that I might have trouble getting through Deep River, and I saw that, in fact, I would have to go to Mattawa, and the rapids weren't any good. So it took me 10 hours to get home because I had to go all the way to North Bay. But I had a very great deal of difficulty getting to Miskaming. So perhaps we could have a solution to that problem as a consumer. That would be very much appreciated.
Still alive, touting about your riding and your jurisdiction and taking shots in your question at other members in a friendly kind of way. But nonetheless, Mr. Lemire, let me be pointed in my response given the time constraints. No question that electric vehicle is all the rage, baby, as Austin Powers might frame it. But there's a couple of other important things that critical minerals have to do for the world and can come from Canada. Frankly, battery storage, that would be really nice here in our major corridor through southern Ontario and Quebec, so we didn't have to spill electricity at ridiculous prices into the United States. I'm not sure if you thought about that, but we're looking at that in Ontario. Battery will require those kinds of critical minerals to do storage. Other high-tech industries, obviously, including our iPhones and everything else, given their demand, you can't have one of those without critical minerals. And of course, national defense. If you take a look at the situation between Ukraine and Russia and the implications for jurisdictions the world over, this is in part about a pending or looming crisis around critical minerals, access to titanium. Russia has threatened nickel. Many of these elements are absolutely essential as countries around the world increase their defense spending.
Thank you.
Most defense technology comes. Oh, Joel, don't.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have the. I have the abject role of interrupting all the time to respect time. But
the happy gavel.
Yes. We'll now move to Mr. Blakey for our last question for 2 minutes.
Thank you. So we talked earlier a little bit about the important role that a proper federal strategy could play in negotiating with our allies, in protecting Canada's security interests in resource development, and we were just about to get around to the opportunities it might present to better integrate Indigenous people into the planning of the industry, hopefully leading to more success in terms of projects that both respect the environment, create opportunities for local communities, but also that don't end up trapped in some of the ways that we've seen resource development get trapped when the concerns of Indigenous people have been responded to with more of a kind of divide and conquer mentality than kind of proactive collaboration from the outset of the project. And as I say, even sooner if we include Indigenous people in the strategic planning for the industry. So I just hope you'll take the rest of my time to speak to that question.
Right. Well, the trigger in the way you initially framed it, Daniel, got me all fired up. I mean, of course, I think what you and I would be concerned about is provincial strategies evolving in the absence of a federal one, and forcing jurisdictions like the United States to come specifically to a given province. And boy, wouldn't it be a shame if the federal government missed out on that important dialogue. But as it pertains, obviously, to Indigenous communities, as I said, we aren't perfect. We continue to try to get better, and I think we have some early successes as a government on some major mining projects. Manitoba Hydro, I think, and the government of Manitoba way back in the day would want to do their hydro build out a lot differently, hydroelectricity build out a lot differently. I was there as a nurse in charge in Cross Lake when we were getting turkeys and roast beefs, basically as compensation for the flooding of those lands. Manitoba Hydro has done a great job since, and the Manitoba governments in various political forms have worked hard to ensure that reconciliation is meaningful, not just as it relates to crown corporations, but also has an economic element to it. And I think that's where the federal government has a rare opportunity to join with partners and ensure that beyond free, prior, informed consent, beyond duties to consult, which a court can say has or hasn't been met, provide a meaningful opportunity for Indigenous communities to be equity partners in these projects. Wailu talked to me today about the extraordinary, fully integrated profile that Indigenous communities and peoples have in their projects. Let's stop going to court and start going to the bank together on the opportunities that we have, and oh, by the way, build road access and corridors that can bring other important things that governments ought to be providing to these Indigenous communities or supporting, like broadband and like alternative forms of energy. In Ontario's case, with way too many communities on diesel power generation. That will change in the next couple of years, Daniel, but those are things that we think that we should be working on immediately.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rickford. Thank you for having taken the time to meet with us this afternoon on behalf of all the members of the committee. So we want to wish you a good rest of the day. So we will now go to our second panel. I have Professor Benoit Plante for 6 minutes, please. Is Mr. Plante there with us? Very good. Please go ahead. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Very good. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to the committee. I'm Benoit Plante. I am a researcher and professor at the University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, and I'm a geochemist. I specialize in environmental aspect, and in the last few years, I've especially worked on critical and strategic minerals. I have worked in this area, and I have a PhD in this area. I've worked on quite a number of research projects since 1994 and since 2014, especially with respect to graphite, lithium, and other minerals. I work with 16 other professors and a whole host of assistants and technologists. We have about 80 postgraduate students. We work very closely with the Polytechnique in Montreal. We have an international reputation when it comes to innovative environmental solutions that are socially and environmentally sustainable, talking about the whole process from exploration right through processing and upcycling. And especially in the far north of Quebec, we have a great deal of development in this area. We have many companies that are supported and work with the the government of Quebec and many institutions. Historically, our research has looked into minerals, but now we are trying to build our capacity to encourage sustainable development for all sorts of minerals, including strategic and critical minerals. We want to make sure that we have the same sustainable development reputation as we do for other types of minerals when it comes to these critical minerals. I work with another professor to develop these minerals, and she works in the area in particular of hydrogeology. We've got Professor Jean-François Boulanger as well, who works in particular with rare earth elements, and Marc Legault, who was hired in recent year to promote research and development. As a country, Canada has a number of deposits of critical minerals, and we have the ability, the skills to develop these deposits, but we have quite a few challenges as well. We need to conduct further research and development to be able to sustainably and responsibly develop these deposits, and we need to do this on a broader scale in Canada. One of the challenges when it comes to working with those that want to extract resources is that many of those involved have a lack of resources, material, human, and financial resources. They don't have access to the funding that they need. The current levers are not there necessarily to provide them with their financial stability. Canada has the potential to become a leader in responsible and sustainable development of critical minerals. We need, though, to have more financial incentives and funding available for this so that Canada can be a world leader in sustainable extraction and processing. So those are my remarks. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Plante. We'll go to Glencore Canada and Peter Xavier, who is the Vice President. Mr. Xavier, please go ahead.
Thank you. Sound check okay?
Yes,
okay, Mr. Chair. Thank you. It's a pleasure, obviously, to come after Minister Rickford. That obviously a lot of our interactions are at a provincial level and been a strong champion of the industry here in Ontario. But Mr. Chair, committee members, and fellow witnesses, my name is Peter Xavier, Vice President of Glencore Sudbury Operations, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of Glencore with focus on Sudbury, my area of responsibility. We welcome the Standing Committee's work on an initiative reflecting the importance of critical minerals. At Glencore, we're responsibly sourcing the commodities that advance everyday life. Our portfolio is made up of critical minerals that will enable the transition to a lower carbon economy. We're one of the largest producers of copper, nickel, and cobalt in Canada, and we made a public commitment to prioritize investment into these commodities. They're essential not only for batteries, but for many uses in modern economy, from getting clean water and electricity to your home, to the infrastructure and technology that we all depend on. Our byproducts include many of the 31 minerals considered critical as set out in the Canadian Minerals and Metals Plan. In Canada, where Glencore is currently celebrating 100 years of operations, we operate 8 industrial sites across our nickel, copper, and zinc operations and directly employ close to 8,000 people, including contractors. Glencore Sudbury Operations has a role in supplying critical minerals. We're currently developing our next generation of deep mines that will utilize electric vehicles and enable us to continue supplying these critical minerals. Our Sudbury smelter processes concentrates from around the globe and is a world leader in recycling in both nickel and cobalt from scrap, catalysts, batteries, and electronics. Our smelter utilizes an electric furnace powered by a clean electrical supply and recently just completed an over $300 million project to reduce emissions. We also operate in conjunction and beside our Indigenous partners, employing hundreds of Indigenous workers and having several memorandums of understanding or participation agreements in place. We're currently investing in the future with approximately $2 billion to develop new mines both in Sudbury, Ontario, and in our Raglan mine in northern Quebec, which will provide a source of nickel, copper, PGMs, and cobalt to at least 2035. These new investments require a significant amount of capital and have a longer payback periods and are inherently riskier as we need to go deeper or into more remote areas. Therefore, to promote additional investment, all levels of government regulating our industry must be able to offer a high degree of investment certainty. Canada needs to support the search for base metals to enable the discoveries that could lead to mining opportunities. Deposits require significant time and investment in exploration and mine development, and with the high cost of new capital, seeing returns on investment could take well over 10 years. It's important to remember that for the most part, we do not set the price for which we sell our products and therefore cannot pass on most costs to our customers. We recommend incentives to conduct exploration activities in and around existing and former operations in the hopes of expanding ore bodies and utilizing existing infrastructure. Once ore bodies are identified, generating the necessary investment to develop an operating mine requires a well-defined business case and regulatory certainty in order to provide confidence over a long time horizon. The key to attracting such major investments is predictability, whether in energy pricing, emission standards, permitting, closure requirements, or carbon strategies. Changing goalposts during investment risks deterring investments in Canada. Governments need to develop a coordinated approach across ministries, as companies often are forced to deal with government in silos. It's also clear that we need to innovate in order to develop mines that are getting deeper, occurring in more remote areas, or declining in grade. Innovation can be accelerated by optimizing the relationship between academia, mining companies, SMEs, and entities such as CMIC and SEMI. When it comes to non-base metals and strategic minerals, we would welcome incentives to determine whether there are critical elements worth recovering from our existing tailings or slag, while recognizing there are additional regulatory hurdles to overcome. Glencore is a unique operator in that custom feeds are part of our operational strategy. The Sudbury smelter has been recovering metals through the reprocessing of spent materials, originally meant for landfill for more than 30 years, now one of the largest recyclers of nickel and cobalt in the world. And our Horn smelter in Quebec is one of the largest electronics scrap recyclers in the world as well. To promote additional recycling capabilities, consideration should be given to offsetting the costs of carbon associated with processing these materials while we continue to explore ways to reduce our emissions. In summary, Glencore is a major supplier of the critical minerals that will supply growing demand from the transition to a low carbon economy, and we're already investing in mines and facilities in order to be able to do that for years to come. Look forward to the dialogue between the Government of Canada on how we can further our shared goals of responsibly sourcing and supplying these important and critical commodities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Xavier. We'll now move to Madame Méthode de l'Association minière canadienne, présidente directrice générale. La parole.
CEO of the Quebec Mining Association. Please go ahead, Ms. Méthode. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for this invitation to appear today. Our time is limited, so I will get right to the heart of the matter. But you should know that the Quebec Mining Association's mission is to proactively promote, support, and develop the responsible, committed, and innovative Quebec mineral industry. And as such, we participated in the various consultations that led to the Canadian Minerals and Mines Plan, Mines and Minerals Plan, as well as the consultation on the Canadian list of critical minerals, which we commented on to include a list of critical and strategic minerals identified by Quebec. We also participated in the Quebec government's reflection, similar to your process now, at the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020. This consultation led to the publication in the fall of 2020 of the Quebec Plan to develop critical and strategic minerals, which our industry welcomed. Our government then adopted the Quebec Battery Development Strategy for the supply chain, and by doing so, the Quebec government is helping to stimulate demand for Quebec strategic and critical minerals. It understood that we needed support, and Quebec created a new tax credit for the development of these minerals to help mining promoters move from exploration to the decision to initiate development and invest as required. I know that in the new Quebec budget, we have added measures as well. In Quebec, the province is well positioned already. I won't discuss all the mines in production or all the mining projects under development, given the time constraints, but we have cobalt, copper, platinum group elements, and then other projects in the areas of nickel, graphite, niobium, and titanium. In particular, when it comes to lithium and graphite, we have very advanced projects. Sayona has a lithium mine which is in care and maintenance that is already operating with its lithium carbonate production and 2 other mine projects, and it also plans to build another plant to process spodumene into lithium carbonate, but may also produce lithium hydroxide. Nemaska Lithium is also developing a project to develop its lithium mine and process the ore into lithium hydroxide. We have also other projects that are in the permitting process. We have a graphite mine that is already producing and 2 projects that are advancing, including Nouveau Monde Graphite, which started in 2021 to build a graphite purification plant and a battery material plant. So we have the materials, the minerals here to ensure that Canada is a leading supplier of the raw materials needed for the global energy transition. With our hydroelectricity, legislative framework, and environmental and social practices, we can position the mineral resources produced here as clean resources that meet the requirements of responsible procurement policies. We feel that there is a real potential to further diversify the Canadian mining sector and benefit from the significant socioeconomic benefits associated with the development of these strategic and critical minerals. Governments that position their competitive advantages early on will be in the best position to take advantage of the growing demands for these minerals. Governments around the world are recognizing the imperative to be part of these emerging industries and are investing billions to develop their at home. So Canada must follow suit. The resources are available, and so is the expertise. We need policies that will first accelerate exploration for these minerals, reduce project approval times, simplify processes, and make them more predictable, reduce risks for investors who choose to locate in Canada. The adoption of a Canadian strategy for critical minerals development would send a clear message that the Government of Canada is positioning its mining sector as a real solution to climate issues and as a source of high potential wealth for Canada. The positive benefits of strategic and critical minerals will therefore add to the benefits Canada already derives from traditional value-added mineral industries. This will inevitably increase the interest of investors and maintain a strong mining activity in Canada. For the Quebec Mining Association, a Canadian strategy should rely on the complementarity of the expertise developed in the various provinces and territories to allow us to go further together. But we must act quickly because the global movement is well underway to secure sources of critical minerals. Decisions on sources of supply are being made now. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Ms. Méthode from the Quebec Mining Association. I don't remember what I said. Thank you. We will now go to Mr. Kunihiro from Stromvold Americas, Inc. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, and to the members, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here as the Director of Strategy for Stromvold, which is striving to be the first North American lithium cell manufacturer in Canada. And initially, we will serve the commercial markets, buses, material handling equipment, agricultural vehicles, perhaps marine craft, but we are fully capable also of supporting automotive and light-duty trucks. Just by way of quick background, I am an auto person by background. Last 15 years, the CFO of two large tier one auto suppliers, one being the largest wire harness provider to battery electric vehicles in North America, as well as I continue to work today with the APMA with Accelerate, ZEV, Trillium, and of course with Stromvold. The proposition that we have will create something in the range of 1,500 jobs by 2030, and we're very excited about that and looking forward to the conversation today. I think maybe just at a high level before the conversation, a few points that I would like to just draw out here is that certainly time is very, very short. Europe is 10 years ahead of us. Asia is probably 20 years ahead. And right now there's a lot of good signs and things happening, but what I don't see is an overall strategy and who is actually driving that to make sure that things happen. The other major point I'd like to raise, there was some earlier discussion about the impact of Buy America and the threats that poses on Canada. I would put to you that Europe is acting as one. China is obviously a very formidable competitor, especially with the fast start they've had, and so I strongly urge you to take advantage of our relationship with the United States and perhaps North America but at least with the United States, and act jointly with them, because we have a lot of what they don't have. So we have leverage in order to make sure that the value add happens. But a made in Canada only solution to me is folly. It's a dream. It can't happen. It's not possible. And so again, I stress we need to work with our U.S. friends, our U.S. brothers and sisters to effectively compete with Europe and with communist Asia. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Konihiro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kunihiro. We will now go to Amanda Hall with Nanotech Corporation. Thank you. Please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Amanda Hall. I'm the CEO and founder of Summit Nanotech. I'm a geophysicist, a professional geophysicist, and I've been in the resource extraction space in Western Canada for nearly 20 years. I used to work in the mining sector in Saskatchewan, and I did industrial processing in Ontario as well. In 2018, I quit my job drilling oil wells and decided to start my own lithium company. I evaluated lithium resource technologies all around the world and decided none of them were good enough. And so I invented my own. I recently won the NRCan Prize for leading female innovator in the Women in Clean Tech Challenge. And we also, as a company, we're at about 41 employees right now. And we recently received funding from BHP Temasek out of Singapore and Capricorn Ventures out of the USA. So we have a lot of international investors. Not my choice. I would have preferred Canadian investors, but Canadian investors are a little bit more gun shy than international investors. So our technology is a sustainable way of extracting lithium from solutions. It has better greenhouse gas emissions, better waste creation metrics. We have higher yields, all sorts of benefits to using our technology. We're deploying it in South America, however. So, just to feed further onto what Robert was just saying about joining forces with the USA to have a North American solution, I would even stretch that further south to say we need to have a North and South American solution to the battery supply chain problems that we're experiencing today. In terms of USA resources, we have partners in the USA that we're working with, and we have partners in Argentina and Chile. We do not have Canadian partners, and there's a lot of reasons why. So I don't think it's wise to turn a blind eye to the amount of resources that the US has. In terms of lithium, I don't know about the other battery metals. That's not my expertise, but lithium is my expertise. So anyway, our technology is at the pilot scale. We sent a 40-foot CCAN down to South America just last month, and we'll be developing the technology into larger scale operations in South America as soon as we can. And I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now from Vail Canada Limité, we have Mr. Merlini and Mr. Nichols. So the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is AJ Nichols. I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs for Valley's Base Metals. I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. Juan Merlini, who is Valley's Global Sales and Marketing Director for Base Metals. Valley would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples whose lands where we operate in Manitoba, Ontario, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Our company is one of the world's largest integrated mining companies with our global headquarters in Rio de Janeiro and a market cap of approximately $90 billion. Our global base metal headquarters, which is headquartered in Toronto, has a rich 120-year history and with operations across 5 continents. In Canada, we operate in Newfoundland and Labrador, as well as in Ontario and Manitoba. Our operations in Canada employ nearly 25,000 Canadians, and our direct and indirect GDP contributions to the Canadian economy over the past 12 years have totaled over $58.4 billion Canadian. We produce metals that are critical to building a cleaner and greener future. We are one of the world's largest producers of high quality and low carbon nickel, and the only fully integrated nickel operations in Canada. We are also an important producer of copper, and responsibly sourced cobalt, all of which are key critical minerals that are essential for the decarbonization shift that we see underway and also demanded by society. Vale shares the Canadian government's determination to decarbonize and create a greener and healthier future for Canadians. For example, in our Ontario operations predominantly, we've introduced 47 battery electric vehicles in our operations underground, and we're very proud of this milestone, and we're looking at more opportunities to electrify our fleets. We have also set ambitious decarbonization goals across the company, targeting a 33% reduction in GHG emissions by 2030, and also trying to aim for carbon neutrality in 2050. However, our GHG agenda is only one part of the Vale Base Metals' broader effort to advance our ESG performance throughout our company, but also in our industry. And we believe that also Canada and the Canadian mining sector has a unique opportunity to be a benchmark and a global standard for the sustainable mining and supply of critical minerals. I'd like to turn things over to Juan, who can provide more comments and insights on the market dynamics and supply chains as it relates to critical minerals. Juan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, AJ. Members of the committee, good afternoon. As we look to the future, Vale's base metals strategy is to shift 40% of our total Class 1 production to the emerging EV industry to meet growing market demand for our products. Nickel, copper, and cobalt are important components of the EV supply chain. To meet Canada's aspirations to be a North American and global leader in the EV battery and critical minerals market, we must address several issues. First, while Canada is well positioned with its nickel reserves and producing mines, we must bring more supply to the markets to meet demand for EV vehicles. Meeting the demand will be a challenge, particularly for nickel and copper. Bringing new nickel, copper, or cobalt deposits online is a capital intensive and takes a considerable amount of time. Even in the most stable and favorable mining investment jurisdictions like Canada, it takes at least 10 to 12 years from the discovery of a viable deposit to reach commercial production. We also need to develop a strategic long-term partnerships with leading academics, institutions, customers, and OEM producers that support long-term and significant investment. These innovations and supply chain ecosystems are essential and have already begun to formulate. Coordination across government jurisdictions is also essential, as the supply chain will need federal, provincial, and local coordination to respond to this generational opportunity. Provinces such as Ontario and Quebec are focusing significant attention on this, but we cannot stress the importance of a multi-level government coordination that provides new investment policy certainty and permitting support. I would like finally to discuss the localization of supply chains. While the battery supply chain is still formative in Europe and North America, automakers prefer localized supply that helps them lower their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions and provide security of supply. It's great to see the recent announcements around the investments of various supply chain actors in Ontario and the province of Quebec. Moreover, COVID and recent events in Eastern Europe, as well as supply chain disruption in Canada, reinforce the need to reduce supply chain risk. We believe that this pressure has had a lasting impact on emerging battery supply chains, and we must ensure that we build insufficient resilience in order for Canada to be the strategic supplier of choice. If we were to leave you with one key message, it will be focus your attention and efforts on increasing the upstream production and tonnage needed to support battery electric vehicles. While hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on developing the battery supply chain, Canada must make significant investment to expand the raw material supply of battery materials. Given the lead time needed to bring new mine capacity online, such action must start now and must be supported by price, which stimulates private investment. Without the battery metals in the right form, creating battery hubs with domestic raw materials will be very challenging. Thank you very much, and we welcome your questions, and we are also happy to provide any further information the committee requires for this study.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Merlini.
Thank you very much, Mr. Merlini and Mr. Nichols. We have time for one round of questions, 6 minutes per party, and that will bring us to 5:45. And so we will start with Mr. Deltel for 6 minutes. Thank you very much to all of our witnesses. As my colleague, Mr. Généreux, said earlier, we have great witnesses, and it's too bad we have so little time. I want to thank Professor Plante from Abitibi-Témiscamingue for his presentation. But my first question will be for Ms. Méthode. And I want to say hello because we have spoken before. I'm very pleased to see you here again this afternoon. We mentioned in your remarks earlier that over the past year and a half, the Quebec government has developed a plan to develop critical minerals and that Canada has to position itself well. Can you talk to us a little bit about Quebec's experience and how that might inspire Canada? Well, I would simply say, first of all, good afternoon, Mr. Deltel. We have spoken a number of times in the past. What Quebec has done is to decide to develop a strategy, and not only did it do that, develop a strategy, a plan, but it developed a plan for sustainable development as well as the development of minerals. So this is an overarching strategy with a broad vision that enables the mining sector to orient our activities. Thank you. When you talk about diversifying your activities, are you talking about that in the processing value-added areas, or are you talking about extraction, or perhaps restoration of sites? What is it exactly you're talking about? Well, there are two things. First, diversifying the types of ores and materials that we're taking out of the soil. For example, in Quebec, we're well known for mining iron and certain other minerals, but we are diversifying the types of ores that we go after. And then second, the processing and strategic development, the battery supply chain, sustainable development, climate change reduction, and so on. So we can create different industries. We don't see the mining sector the way we used to. We can stimulate demand by inviting companies to come to Quebec and develop a niche in the battery supply chain. So we've got the strategy that helps our companies develop. We want increasing processing facilities because that is important, but this isn't easy. It's difficult to get financing. We have support for mineral extraction, but we want to make sure that we get support as well for processing. We need financing and other support. Quebec has decided to create a plan for the battery supply chain because having this value chain in Quebec will build on what we're good at, which is extracting minerals. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Méthode, for your points. I would now like to turn to Professor Plante. Good afternoon, and thank you for being with us and your remarks. You said earlier that right now our goals were unrealistic for processing because we don't have the financing support in place. So given what Ms. Méthode has just said, that is, among other things, that those extracting the minerals don't have the experience and the capacity to process these minerals. So if we don't have a realistic plan right now, what do we need? Thank you for that question, Mr. Deltel, and for the opportunity to provide a concrete example. Quebec developed a program for sustainable development in the mining sector. They have a special envelope for strategic and critical minerals. We have a 10-to-1 ratio for this funding. That is, the companies put in 10%. And this is very helpful. So that's an example that could be useful in the federal sector. For example, we could have a 2-to-1 leveraging program. The 1-to-10 is a good example, though, of something that really provides stronger attraction for companies. Well, yes, I think 10-to-1 is certainly a big incentive. Yes, that does require a lot of funding from the government. The Quebec government has an envelope for this, but we're talking about projects that would involve only $300,000 a year. So there's a lot more demand than what the program can really accommodate. But the federal government could have a role to play in providing this kind of funding to help. Thank you very much, Mr. Plot. I will go now to Ms. Lapointe for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Two companies that have a significant impact on Sudbury here today that I get to talk to, so kind of feels like home week on the Hill. So thank you to Glencore and Vale for agreeing to be here today. My first question is to Vale. So in March of last year, Vale testified at the Natural Resources Committee during their study on critical minerals and associated value chains. What I'd like to do now is hear more from you about how Canada can position itself as a key supplier of critical minerals globally, but also how can we ensure supply domestically?
I can go here. Thanks a lot for the question. Well, Vale continue progressing on its EV strategy. We continue developing the relationship with the key customers and bringing, let's say, the attention for the Canadian market. Right? What we can offer definitely not only our current, let's say, nickel production, that is one of the lowest carbon footprint in the nickel industry, with the highest standards in terms of ESG, but we also can offer a potential growth. So we have been promoting all our, let's say, potential and how we can enhance our strategy and fostering a battery materials supply chain in Canada. It is a significant effort. We have been into this process for almost 2 years. We're starting to see some of the results of the discussions become more effective, more direct. We are getting more alignment, but it's still a big challenge. I think we still have a lot of investments in order to bring more nickel and also to shape the profile of our nickel production in order to fulfill the requirements that are very specific for the battery material. So we continue working hard. We have a strategy where we want to position a significant share of our nickel production into the EV supply chain, but more than there, to enable, with the right support, with the right alignment, the growth. We are also looking to other opportunities. We're studying recycling, so recycling the black mass, the material that comes from the EV batteries. We are looking for ways to adjust our materials. So we keep progressing, and I think there is a lot of opportunities for Canada. Finding the right alignment, find the right opportunity. I think it's a unique opportunity that Canada can pursue.
Yeah,
Mr.
Merlini,
yes,
to your point on supply chains. So over the course of this study, this committee has repeatedly heard the need to develop our localized supply chain. Can you tell us, what do you need from legislators to expedite a process that is evidently behind?
For sure, expedite. Thanks for the question. Expediting the licensing, the coordination between all the levels of on the government, on the federal, provincial, on the local, support in terms of creating the right incentives in order to pursue the exploration, in order to pursue some of the technological investments that will be required in order to fulfill the demand for the battery material supply chain, creating the right conditions for that supply chain to move here in Canada. So we are upstream, we are on the mine and processing our let's say our nickel concentrate into a form that it still requires significant investments in order to fulfill the battery materials. So I think on our side, we are very engaged with the government and very clear in terms of the requirements we need in terms of support and in creating the environment to attract all this investment. Canada has a long tradition in terms of the mining, and it's a very stable jurisdiction. But we need to catch up now. The size of the challenge, the investments that are required, the amount, the volume, the stability that is required to fulfill the EV industry, it's unprecedented, and that's the support we need from all the levels.
So what is needed from a policy perspective to go from raw material mined in, like, for example, in Sudbury, to a product that's ready to use in Canada's auto sector for EV batteries?
The good news, Madam Member of Parliament, is that we already have a lot of the processing in place in Canada. So in Sudbury, just as an example, I mean, we have a fully integrated operation where you have exploration, mining, processing, milling, and also final products being produced in Canada. As Mr. Mellini alluded to, what is interesting is now you've got industry that's looking at how can we get into battery grade materials where we're shifting existing production that could be used for interesting applications into the EV battery material market. And with provinces such as Ontario and Quebec, as we saw from the testimony from Minister Rickford, but also from Ms. Method representing the Mining Association of Quebec, there's a lot of excitement going in regards to the midstream, as well as OEM announcements on the downstream. So if you look at it in terms of a giant set of ingredients for baking a cake, Canada is attracting that because of its stable jurisdictions, because of its financial markets, its access to capital, its predictability in its regulatory as well as legislative regimes, provincially as well as federally. This already offers a lot of comfort and incentive for major investors, tier one investors, both domestic as well as international, to look at Canada as a very attractive jurisdiction. I think what is being iterated by our fellow panelists here too is that we have to try and sort of dot the I's and squares the T's in terms of making sure that we have a coordinated approach to get that supply chain anchored and working in a very coordinated way throughout government as well as industry, academics, and associations as well, so that we can sit around the same table and figure out what are the problems we communally need to solve or overcome, as well as the opportunities that we can seize together. And having that sort of whole of government approach, and that's both at a federal and provincial and local level, I think will even accelerate the attractiveness of a jurisdiction like Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nichols. We'll now move to Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of the witnesses for your excellent presentations. I want to start with Mr. Plante, obviously, at the University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. In Minister Champagne's mandate letter, he is called on to help Canada become a leader in the area of these critical minerals when it comes to the battery supply chain. So how does your work tie in with that objective? Thank you, Mr. Lemire. Our efforts deal with exploring for the resource and then responsible, sustainable development, minimizing environmental impacts, both for the disruption of the ecology and waste materials. We work with promoters of graphite and lithium mines, and as well as iron and gold mines. And the work that is done is not done by university professors, but our students who are highly qualified. And this is a perfect opportunity by working on these issues to train those who will be the leaders of tomorrow to carry out responsible development of mining resources. Their work is made available to the industry, to the whole ecosystem, those working on these projects, those developing them. And so the whole community benefits from the information, not just those industry leaders, those that are developing the mines. So the issues and opportunities are similar across the board because we have the same context for the geology, the socioeconomic aspects, and so on. So this enables us to move things forward and enable Canada and Quebec to position themselves as leaders in this field. Quebec and Canada have huge expertise that has developed in the area of precious metals. There are many common challenges and many similarities between these areas, between traditional and new development. We've got water treatment. We've got all sorts of aspects that are very similar. So this is how we help the industry. With respect to processing, it's very challenging to make sure that we minimize the impact to the environment of processing. I work myself in the area of geochemistry, and I work with other professors on this to improve our processing so that we reduce any negative impact. Thank you. Your model is really to work closely, to have a synergy with the companies and to develop skills. The federal government proposed $9.6 billion over 3 years for the battery supply chain. Maybe yours would be the best place to have that specialized center. Well, of course, if I want to beat my own drum, we do work closely with the CEGEP. We have a whole nucleus of experts in research and development in this area. We also have a number of partners that may well be interested in contributing to research in this field. So clearly, this is a very good place to bring together the teaching staff and all those involved. We work from the college level right through postgraduate studies. We have also the whole industry that is here. It's a good place to test and carry out the work. So I think it would be an ideal place. Thank you. I have a very quick question for Ms. Méthode. What can you tell us about processing and reprocessing, upcycling in Quebec? the production of cells through recovery. Can you talk about what's coming up in those areas? Well, I talked about this a little bit in my remarks. I mentioned Nouveau Monde, graphite, efforts underway to develop more value-added materials for anodes with graphite, for example, projects that they and other companies have with lithium and lithium carbonate. So we have a lot of projects. Some of them are in the permitting process, and some of them are seeking financing. In the new sectors, there is room for processing in lithium, graphite, and perhaps also rare earths, because research and development is still needed in that area, more so than in lithium and graphite development. We have great plans for processing. Everybody talks about it a great deal. Here in Quebec and across Canada, everybody says we need more processing capacity. There are markets, as we've heard. Vale talked about that. The nickel industry is well developed, copper as well in Ontario. But what we have always called for is there are new sectors, these critical and strategic minerals, that need to be processed as well as extracted in Quebec and across Canada. But as I mentioned earlier, we have to act quickly. We have to move forward quickly because everyone is competing in this area right now. Thank you. We will now go to Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes.
Ms. Hall, I wanted to come back to you, first of all, to congratulate you on your achievements, but also to follow up on a comment that you made in your opening statement just about the reticence of Canadian investors. And I just wonder if you might have a little bit more to say about why it is you think that Canadian investors have been slow to kind of get on what we're hearing is a train that's leaving the station with a very promising future. Do you think that's because international investors are just more bullish? Do you think Canadian investors are used to often being able to invest in contexts where government is de-risking their investments? What do you think are some of the reasons why Canadian investors aren't trying to get in more aggressively to this developing Canadian market? And what are some of the things you think might respond to whatever concerns are out there that are impeding Canadian investment in our own resources?
Thanks for the question. I believe it's I believe that the reason is that the international investors have a broader perspective of what the opportunity is, and they have more confidence in the solutions that we're offering from a sustainability perspective and from an advanced materials perspective. I don't think Canadians are uneducated in this space at all, but just their risk tolerance is a little bit lower. And so they tend to sit back and follow rather than lead in most cases. Even the BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada, sat out on my last financing round just to wait and see what would happen. And then, of course, the international investors swooped in and they want us to leave Canada and set up shop somewhere else. But I've been fighting to stay in Canada and continue our progress here. But it's a shame. It's a shame that we don't have more Canadian investor support. But I think it's just a little bit of a risk tolerance question.
Canada. And I guess I wonder, we've talked a lot already just in this panel alone on the importance and the significance of having a federal strategy in Canada for critical resource development. To what extent do you think that might help? I mean, certainly the Business Development Bank of Canada is something that has, I think, a pretty obvious role to play in a federal strategy when we talk about electrification and the professed climate goals. of the current government. I mean, clearly there's room to try and advance that strategy. So I guess I'm just curious to know what are some of the elements that you think could be incorporated into a Canadian critical mineral strategy that you think might spur more Canadian investment in the industry?
I think what investors are looking for in new startup companies or companies that are in the resource extraction space for sustainable battery metal development, they're looking for customer traction. And you just don't get that in Canada the way you do internationally. So my customers are in South America because they're willing to pay for this technology, and they're willing to pay for the scale up and the development of the technology. But Canada just doesn't seem to have that appetite. So when our customers are all international, then our investors become international as well. And so what I'm finding is that even EV manufacturers from outside of Canada are looking to secure the upstream supply chain by investing in the resource itself and in the extraction technologies itself. And it's in their best interest to secure that and be able to have some control over where the product is going. And so BHP out of Australia and Temasek out of Singapore, they want to know where the lithium's coming from and where it's going in the world. And so it's in their best interest to invest early and invest upstream as much as possible to make sure that they have some say in where the product ends up.
And to what extent would you say that those international customers that are helping to drive investment from outside of Canada in our talent and in our resources are supported by their national governments who have a strategy? I mean, is this just something that they're doing on their own and kind of spontaneously, or would you say that they have a little more courage and a little more confidence because they're operating within a national strategic context where they're from that Canada figures into?
Yeah, I think one advantage that Canada has is that these international producers, they've been in production for decades of battery metals. And I'm speaking mostly of lithium, of course, because that's my specialty. So they have 20, 30-year offtake agreements with battery manufacturers out of Asia. And so they need to satisfy those offtake agreements by making sure that their supply chain is optimized and always, never has any downtime, of course. And so the governments in Chile and Argentina are supporting lithium development and lithium production. They've even asked me, the Chilean government asked me to join their board of their clean tech board for helping get lithium out of the country in a more sustainable way, because they know that Canadians in particular, we do have a reputation of doing things the right way. And so we can fly that sustainability flag up our pole, and people do look to us as an example of the right way to do things. And so the archaic methods of extraction that are being done in Australia and Chile and Argentina, they know they need to improve on those methods in order to comply with social demand and ESG regulations from the governments. So they're looking for new technologies like ours to help them achieve those goals. Canada's just behind the 8 ball because we haven't started developing yet or producing yet. So that urgency, that sense of we need to do this as fast as we can isn't as strong here. We're a little bit slower in adoption of the new technologies. However, the good thing about Canada is that we can develop processes from the ground up using new sustainable processes, advanced materials, and technologies that are coming out of Dr. Plant's labs.
Question at the end. I mean, what does it mean if Canada wants to be a big player in EV manufacturing? I mean, what does it mean for manufacturers that might operate in Canada if in other countries they're already kind of securing Canadian resources, Canadian technology for their supply chains? How does Canada then come late to the game to position itself as a serious EV manufacturer?
Well, it's going to be challenging. And coming from the oil and gas sector, I saw this play out over the years. When your resource is more expensive than everybody else's, then it's really hard to sell it. So it's hard to sell it internationally. It's even hard to sell it in Canada. Like, there's a reason why Eastern Canada uses Saudi Arabian oil. It's cheaper than Alberta oil. So you can apply the same conceptual ideologies around lithium. So if it costs me $8,000 to produce a ton of lithium in Canada, but I can get it for $3,000 a ton in Chile, why would I buy Canadian lithium? So I think the answer is in the short term to have the government subsidizing as much as possible our ability to innovate in the space and make sure that we get our operating costs down as low as possible. This happened in the shale gas sector as well. We drove down the cost of producing shale gas to a point when it was competitive. So competitive pricing and competitive production is a very important goal that we'll have to try to meet. And then the other thing that's missing, and that Canada could probably step in and fill, is that if you produce a ton of lithium in Quebec today, you still have to transport that ton of lithium to Asia to be turned into a cathode before it can go in a battery in the gigafactory in Houston with Elon Musk. It has to go to Asia because there's no alternative here in North America. We don't do cathode manufacturing here, and we need to keep the supply chain local.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting, and I want to thank all witnesses for taking the time this afternoon. It's been very useful to this committee. I'd also like to remind you that if you want to table any documents that you think might be useful to this document, please feel free to do so through the clerk. Again, thank you very much for your time, and this meeting is adjourned. Merci aux analystes, aux interprètes.
Thank you to the analysts and the interpreters as well, and of course to our clerk.